So let's take Erikson, for example. Most of you guys have heard about Erik Erikson. He did a brilliant outline of the psychosocial stages and how we develop all the way through old age. We're going to talk more about that in our minorities chapter. But Erik Erikson has a really neat life history where he was born in 1902 in Denmark. His mother was Danish, his father was Jewish. So he was a Jewish-Danish child in the early 1900s. Keeping in mind, Jewish people had a kind of hard run of it in Europe in the early 1900s. But he struggled because he didn't really look Jewish, but he didn't really look Danish either. Or he looked more Danish, so he didn't fit in with the Jewish kids. But he couldn't fit in with the Danish kids because he was Jewish and they didn't like him. So his mom also, what kind of contributed to the problem was in the early 1900s, imagine this was difficult for her, that she had Erik outside of marriage. So she was having an affair with a married man, from what I understand. She got pregnant, and of course, well, not of course, but as things go, he didn't want to play much of a role. So now you have a single mother in 1900 in Denmark. So she ended up moving to Germany, where she put herself through the training to be a nurse, which I gotta commend her on that. She must have been pretty tough to be a single mom in 1900, move to another country, educate herself, and then to become a pediatric nurse, working for a pediatrician with the last name Hamburger. Very German, eh? Anyway, so she fell in love with Hamburger, and they got married. And when Erik, who was actually born Erik Salomonsen, was his birth name, Erik Salomonsen in Denmark, because that's a tradition of those countries, the Scandinavian countries, is to give your child the name like the son of you. So if you're Samuel, then your kid would be Samuelson or Samuel daughter. Anyway, so Erik was Erik Salomonsen. Then he moved to Germany. He was adopted as a child by the pediatrician and named Erik Hamburger. And his name was really Erik Hamburger all the way up until his 30s. He had already been publishing papers as a psychologist and working in the field. But here's what happened. When he was the son of Hamburger and he was going as Erik Hamburger, he was still struggling to fit in anywhere because he looked Danish, but he was Jewish, and Jewish people in Germany, eeks, he was really having a hard time making friends, and he felt like he fell between the cracks with every social group. So later on in his life, Erik Erikson studied people who fall in those cracks or who are marginalized, who don't fit in one group or another. He studied Native American children who were taken from their tribes and tried to be made white or, quote, civilized, and how then they couldn't go back to their tribes, but they certainly weren't going to be put into the same ranks as the white people of America in the day. He studied veterans who went off to war and then came back and felt like, I don't really fit in with these people anymore because I've been and seen things that are different from this, and I can't just go back to normal. He spent a long time studying identity until eventually, when he was in his 30s, he came to terms with himself and his own identity, and he legally changed his name to Erik Erikson. And this was to follow the thread of his birth, which is Danish or Scandinavian by tradition, and their traditions is to name the son of yourself, right? Son of your name. So he was Erik, son of himself, and he changed his name legally to Erik Erikson as a way to claim his identity in his adulthood. Bet you didn't know that, huh?